One. Welcome to the Trainer Feed. We are your hosts. My name is Angel Sanchez. With me, I have Mr. Jacques Delogere
What's going on, everyone?
watching the U.S. Open, and Mr. David Bravo
Hello. What's up?
not watching the U.S. Open.
Oh, how? What's up? There we go.
David's microphone is going through some technical difficulties, so we will be using our best judgment to share. So Jacques and David will be sharing today. Sharing is caring.
Pause. What?
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring.
Wait, do your headphones not work too?
It sounds very like.
Oh, like Charlie Brown?
Yeah. It just yeah. This is my gaming headset, so I always
Throw it around.
throw it around and get mad.
Yeah, raging.
Sponsor me for a new headset. David Bravo Foundation.
All right, so this actually can segment into our first topic. Our topic is, what is a sport? In light of e-gaming and esports, and some other sports that, some people say they aren't really sports and whatever. So I got into a conversation with one of my clients who's very passionate about golf. And he loves golf, and he talks about how an incredible sport it is. And then I got into a conversation with somebody else who is not a fan of golf, and they were saying it's not a sport because there's nobody who's going to block it or defend it. It's just you doing it yourself. And then the other angle is about like maybe not offense and defense or playing necessarily against somebody in that same bout, but it's more about competition, right? Like you're competing against other people, and then that would be a sport. But then that opens the door for things like esports, which some people feel like isn't really a sport because you're not moving your body. And then they have like their own like situation. So what do you guys think?
I think to play golf you have to be very incredibly skilled, but there's no conditioning required. Is there? There's no. I just have to be very careful how I tread with this because I have a lot of clients who love golf. So
They're gonna jump you.
too many of them are listening.
They're gonna beat you.
No, look, I definitely think it's a skill. It just has a different demand on the body than something such as basketball or tennis. But look, in the UK, they consider darts a sport, which is literally what you do in like the pubs. And they come out and have like the fighters' coats, like they're like running the ring. It is hilarious. This thing has ever been a thing. I mean, I'm not saying this is a very general way of saying it, but people would say a lot of people. I don't know, when I was growing up playing rugby, they'd say, for it to be a sport, you have to sweat almost. And we always talk about, like, the workout doesn't have to be an efficient workout. You don't have to sweat to have an efficient workout. So I think in that light, you would say it like that. But that's just... I'm not into it personally, but I can see why someone might. I think it's great for, and I mentioned my clients, like people who, when you age, it's something to stay active with and to make sure you get your steps in. You're probably not going to get your heart rate anywhere higher than the tail end of heart rate zone 1, maybe zone 2 if you're nervous. But that's why I'm kind of on the fence about that one. How about you, David?
I think golf is a sport. Just like bowling is a sport. There's a lot of technique involved and skill. You're playing against other people. The wind and the natural environment is what's kind of hooking it up. Yeah, I mean, you have natural environments that are going to try to prevent you from getting a hole-in-one. So you do have to navigate all that stuff. So I do think it's a sport.
Golf?
Sport would be like something that is very technically driven. You got to build up the skill, competitiveness about it.
What about gaming?
I mean, I think there's a reason why it's called esports, not sport, I mean, we're technically competing against people in the video game that requires skill as well, and you have to be efficient, and you have to be also in top shape to do that. You need to have good reaction time. You need to have, finger dexterity and all that stuff, and you gotta put the time in to get good at the game. I think it's a sport, but again, it's called an e-sport for a reason, I think.
So it's similar. So it's probably similar to the dart throwing thing, for the exception that it's electronic, right? Because like the dart throwing it takes like dexterity,
Darts
focus.
takes skill too. You gotta like really
Yeah.
do it well.
All right. Let's go to Jack. Jack has the definition.
So the definition, going to Google, an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. And the example is team sports such as baseball and soccer, football. So physical exertion is skill. So
And
so I think gaming is an incredible skill, kind of what David just said. It takes hours and hours to get or to be a pretty serious contender at it. But as you said, finger dexterity, I mean, you can argue you develop the stamina to be able to use your hand muscles for extended periods of time. But I don't know. I just think about that sweating example is not the all end all be all, but I think that's usually a good indicator. I just think it's something we have to move a little bit, and you get people. But then again, you could also say, like Formula One. In theory, you're not moving, you're driving, but I've heard you need to have serious amounts of core strength to do that, to resist the G's when you're going such high speeds, right? And they have to be some really fit athletes. And you wouldn't think that. You would think, you're just sitting down, you're just driving. That can't be that hard. But from what I've heard, it's actually very difficult. And I believe it's very difficult, and they're very skilled. So there's definitely the clear-cut examples of sport. We mentioned tennis, we mentioned basketball, we mentioned... we were talking about golf, but I think there's definitely the clear-cut ones, some of them I've just mentioned, and some that are kind of in that gray area. Depending on who you are and what your background is, you may side on one or the other, whether it being a sport. But I guess some people can conflict sport with skill, because just because you're not performing a sport or a physical activity, or your heart rate isn't elevated for periods of time, doesn't mean what you're doing isn't requiring any skill. But
yeah, because then you could also say like
You think cheerleading is a sport?
a staring contest. I think cheerleading is.
I
Like,
think it's definitely a sport.
That's definitely a sport.
Yeah, because they're cheering competitions. You're competing against another team.
Yeah, and they go
Yeah,
hard. Same thing
takes a
with
lot of skill.
dancing. And I think arguably, I don't know if there's like singing competitions except for like American Idol, but I think that could also be qualified because it's not only just like your vocals, but it's also the ability to entertain, like to the second point of that definition. Because like I think you can have incredible vocals.
I don't know. I think in that one, that's subjective too.
Yeah,
Dancing, singing, a lot of it is subjective.
but cheerleading is.
Cheerleading, I don't think, because you have set scores or
But what's
set lifts, set jumps that you have to do, I think.
So, I guess. Okay, so there's a subjectivity to it. So if it's not an objective, well, then it's difficult to say, right? Because you have to be subjective when you have jumps, right? Like let's say two teams have the same amount of jumps. Which one was a better jump? Which one was a better landing, and why? And if you have 10 people or 100 people grading it, would it be the same grade, right? Like with the Olympics.
Yeah, politics that go
Like they
into
have
it, too.
that. Like those are obviously all sports, and there are a lot of judges, and they will almost never be the same grade.
that's another thing you just brought up, the Olympics too. Some people wouldn't consider archery a sport, but it's in the Olympics.
Right.
And then skateboarding, I think, recently came into the Olympics.
Yeah.
Some people wouldn't see. To me, I would consider that a sport
Yeah, easily.
because I did it a little as a kid. Wasn't necessarily any good at it, but it's an asymmetrical style of sport. But over periods of time, you're doing a lot of moving, a lot of core. Yeah, it's interesting. There's also, for example, there's clay pigeon shooting in the Olympics, right? When those discs come out and you have to shoot them, whatever, and that's a skill. But I don't know how elevated your heart rate gets there. So an exertion. Do you consider the core strength of just holding the rifle for periods of time? I don't know. That can be a bit of a gray area too. Again, if someone's sick at it, you'd say, yeah, they're very skilled. But I don't know. It's just, but then you can then go down the rabbit hole of comparing. You could even go down the rabbit hole of saying, oh, which athletes are fitter, and you would say, well, maybe a basketball player because they just don't stop for the whole duration, even if they do sit out for parts of the game. It's more demanding, and it doesn't mean they're any less skilled than a clay pigeon shooter, but they're more conditioned. I don't know. I think it depends on who you ask. You're gonna get different answers. That's what I think.
Yeah, because even I think it all stems from the fact that sports are human made, right? So like sport doesn't necessarily exist without humans. So I think competition does to a certain extent, but the competition is like who's going to get to the food fastest, who's going to hunt the most, who's going to gather the most, things like that. Like in that sense, but it's never really scored. It's just like who's going to survive. So survival is the game. So that's why it's a little bit harder to define. Same thing with fittest. Like fitness is a culmination of, I suppose, a lot of different, variables or a lot of different aspects. It's not just one thing. It's not just strength. It's not just endurance. And I guess it depends on what sport you're actually playing and how that applies. And then even being the fittest in your sport doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win all the time. So that's another thing. Remember that whole thing about like the Lakers building the superpower team of like all these athletes, and then they didn't win the championship. They weren't even in the finals.
And even to your point,
Final. I think that's
even
what
to your point, the best. Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants is a sick, phenomenal athlete. Doesn't mean anything if he hasn't got a line to run behind. And I have one of my clients who does listen to this as well. And we always talk about maybe we should have traded him, maybe you shouldn't have picked him years and years ago because the shelf life of a running back isn't that long compared to a lineman.
He's towards the end of his shelf life, right?
As a running back, he's kind of halfway through, and he only got drafted 3 or 4 years ago. And that's not long, but the shelf life of a running back, I think, is 6 to 8 years, like their prime, and then maybe they get like a handful of snaps in a team that's already got two serious running backs. But the Giants are another problem in itself, right? But his talent is almost wasted behind a terrible line, and he is one of the most gifted. I bet you if you go on Madden and you look at running backs on ratings, he has to be in the top 5, maybe top 10. Top 5 is gonna be a little too generous, but he's one of the most highly skilled players. Was drafted number 2 overall, I want to say.
Right.
But he's not been in the playoffs once. Probably not going to this year. Might not ever with the Giants.
Yeah.
And it's like Odell Beckham.
Right. Odell
Sickest receivers on a garbage team. He gets dropped by Cleveland, goes to the Rams, finally wins a Super Bowl because he probably wasn't going to win one anywhere else.
Yeah.
But he's phenomenal talent, and that's just where...
I think he was phenomenal talent, but he
that
also...
one-handed catch.
Yeah.
Bananas. Now everyone does it, but back then it was...
Yeah, back then.
This guy's falling back, got fouled, and has 3 fingers on the ball. But to the point, insane talents on teams that are not... and also, as you said, I think it can be interesting, like the Open just was on a few weeks ago. It can be interesting to see that some of the better players aren't necessarily the most conditioned as well. And so Federer actually, without going too far off, he was very good about trying to win his matches in and out and be done fast. Because I think usually, not so much in the beginning of his career, but later on in his career, the longer the match went on, and now, but the problem is he strikes so early, so fast, you're already down so much. It's kind of a mental battle by that point, and he's got you in a stranglehold. So that's just based on the matches I've watched Federer play. He's very good at starting off fast out the gate, and he knows that he's not like a slack by any means, but like his strengths are starting off strong.
Yeah, and just like learning from experience and learning from the exposure, like what he should do and the coaching that it takes and the planning that it takes to do that, right? Like just changing your style up as you continue to age in the sport. Because now we're also pushing limits of like some of these athletes of how long they can actually play in their sport, just because of all the science and the knowledge that's coming towards, coming to the athletes, coming to the lay person, let alone athletes. Like the athletes, I saw something Gatorade had like sweat patches that you can put on you, and they can read your sweat because they say that everybody has different sweat. I guess like sweat patterns in the sense like how much they sweat and how they sweat and what is actually coming out of the sweat in order to help them refuel as well. So it's like, I mean, obviously, the average Joe might not have that unless he's got money in the bank. But even if it's like that and then all the other resources. So, yeah, so planning ahead and trying to figure out what is happening to you and why you're playing like this and then how to improve that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, that about sums it up. David is a man of few words today. Any closing thoughts?
If you're listening to this or watching this, please throw comments in the comment section, especially on YouTube, on your thoughts are, or even on our Instagram. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Creating conversations, discussion about this helps us not only be more, or not only helps us to deliver better content, but the more opinions we hear, the more versed we can be in this stuff as well. So definitely don't be shy to throw those comments in and slide in his DMs. The trainer feeds DMs, I'm sorry, but his DMs most importantly.
Coach D Bravo. And then also make sure to like on YouTube. I noticed that there's a lot of visitors on our YouTube channel and then also for a lot of our YouTube videos. So make sure to throw a like in there and let us know what you think. Is staring contest, our staring contest, is that a sport? Is thumb wrestling a sport? Is competitive drinking, beer pong? Is beer pong a sport? David would say yes. We'll catch.
I don't know. Maybe.
All right. We'll find out on the next episode of the Trainer Feed.
Catch you on the next one, team.
Later. Peace.
Peace.